Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the FanScription podcast. I am Walter Benasiak here with my good pal Rob Walker. What's going on?
Not much.
Yeah, you didn't go out or anything today. You take a walk or
I was
nothing
doing
like
some
that.
Photoshop work for the company, so actually, no, I haven't even gone out walking yet. But
Yeah, that's about all we could do at this point. But I hear things are slowly starting to open up. So maybe at some time in the next couple months, we'll get back to the unusual around here. But this is what we got going on right now. It's our socially distanced video podcast. So I hope you guys are enjoying these. Today we're
we're
talking
we're
about.
actually in the same building. We're just on other sides of the wall. We're 6 feet away, so
Yeah, exactly. We had to do this just to keep up the illusion.
yeah.
So we're talking about our two episodes from last month for Fanscription. The first one was the Roger Rabbit episode that Rob did another great editorial on. And the other one is a more regular episode of Fanscription, What If Jafar Won, the Aladdin Fanscription that I've been wanting to make for a long time. So we'll get into talking about both of those. If you haven't seen those for whatever reason, make sure you go ahead and check those out because we're going to be discussing them in full length on here. So let's talk about Roger Rabbit first. Before we get into any of your deep dive into the actual, inner makings of that and why you think it's so great, let's talk about your first memories of Roger Rabbit. Who framed Roger Rabbit, that is. So this came out in 1988, which was the year I was born. So I don't have any theatrical.
Child,
I know.
baby.
I am. I'm a zygote. So I was not around yet, but I did rent this a lot. I remember, seeing this at our local video store and like checking it out a lot because it had all of the cartoons in it. Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, all of them were in there. What was your experience of seeing this for the first time, Rob?
I didn't see Felix the Cat in there though. There was no Ralph
Oh,
Bakshi.
damn.
No. I was 88. Let's see. I was 9. Maybe. Yeah, no, I was 9. I was 9 years old. It blew our little childhood minds just because the idea of all these characters together, the live action animation, the way that was all fused together was something that we hadn't really seen before. I know people are like, well, Mary Poppins and this and that, and like to a small degree, but in this kind of sense of like a fully realized world where animated characters were just running around in it. At least as a 9-year-old, I had never seen that before. In Mary Poppins, they go into a chalk drawing. Like it's a little different. Same idea and technique, but no, Doug and I were mesmerized by it. It was one of our favorite movies growing up. We got it on VHS the second it came out. Big influence on the two of us. Definitely one of our favorite movies. As I grew up, it only got better. When you're a kid, you miss all the jokes. There were some jokes even back then. I got the booby trap joke, but as you grow up, you catch the adult references. But there were other things in there just when it came to just filmmaking skill and technique, and the writing in that movie is amazing. That I was like, wow, this just aged. Like it wasn't one of those films I'm like, oh, I enjoyed it as a kid, and now it's just a guilty pleasure. I'm like, there's no guilty pleasure about it. It's just an amazingly well-crafted movie.
And we talked to you, or you talked a lot about this in your episode that Robert Zemeckis is pretty much a filmmaking genius. I think we all can pretty much agree on that at this point in time. So he brought over Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future to play Judge Doom in this. So there was kind of that connection going on.
Remember me?
Were you aware of that as a kid? That this is the same director as Back to the Future, or hey, that's Doc? Did that like stick out to you when you first saw it?
I can't. I was not aware it was the same director because keep in mind when Back to the Future came out, I was 6.
Right.
So that didn't enter my head. I'm trying to remember if I realized that was. I think I realized that was Doc Brown at the time, and I thought it was because not too long afterwards, a couple years later, we had Addams Family out, and I realized that was Christopher Lloyd, and I knew who Christopher Lloyd was. So that was interesting, but he's so. And he did this in Addams Family too. He's just so different from what he is in Back to the Future. But he has this fantastic way of moving where Doug put it best. We were talking about that movie at one point years ago, and he's like, he moves like a cartoon character in a way. My favorite is they always have this fan on him, so his cape is always blowing. In the Acme warehouse, there should be no wind, and yet when he shows up, his cape is just always flowing. But my favorite is like he does this thing where he never turns his head that much. He always moves his whole body like whoosh, like it's a whole body move. And I remember there was one point where he like swings around and he's like, put them in my car, and he's just like a full body turn, just whoosh, like he's Batman, because Batman could never turn his head because of the suit.
Right.
So it was just an amazing performance. And then the fake teeth they gave him, I'm just like, yeah, when you watch it, you're just kind of like, he is a cartoon character. He moves like this, like almost like the Bug in Men in Black in the Edgar suit. Yeah, he almost moves like an alien or a cartoon character in a human suit. Like he can't quite get a grip on it.
For sure. Yeah, he's definitely a thing that sticks out there. Of course, Bob Hoskins, the late great Bob Hoskins, played another memorable character. Yes.
Flawless accent.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
No, well, Doug and I complain about this because Brits sometimes when they do American accents, I think it's a little obvious. But that was one where I didn't realize till after the fact. I'm like, oh my God, he's British.
Right. He does a great kind of New York almost style accent, like an East Coast kind of thing. He does that really well. He does that in other movies. Even in the Super Mario Brothers movie, I thought he pulled that off really well.
Well, I guess the idea was that you kind of find out in that mise en scène thing that they do is that it looks like he, I think, grew up in New York, judging by the pictures, and had moved to the West Coast at some point. So, no, it's flawless performances all around.
For sure. And you talked a lot about the mise en scène in this. This was like a big part of your episode. Just talking about how the background tells the story and also gives us a lot of information about the backstory of the characters and everything. Was that the main reason you wanted to do this as a FanScription editorial, or what made you want to do this one?
I really love that scene, and I love techniques of character exposition that feel organic, that they're not bad dialogue or just giant plot dumps where the whole movie grinds to a halt. My favorite scene in Spaceballs is when Colonel Sanders at some point gives some plot exposition and Dark Helmet turns towards the audience and says, "Did everybody get all that?" That happens so many times in movies where it's just so obvious that the scene is there just for that. And I thought Roger Rabbit was just a brilliant example of how to organically give character exposition and plot exposition in general without it feeling like, okay, we got to pause the movie for your plot dump here. It parses it out in little bits. And you don't even realize it's happening, half the time. You'll get throwaway lines, well, you're the private detective, you figure it out, and it sounds like something somebody would say, like, well, you're the genius, and it tells you all these things, like, really instantly, particularly Eddie's first scene where he sips, the whiskey, so he's an alcoholic. He says tunes, so he hates tunes, and then he puts it in a gun holster, so you're like, well, this guy had a past, but now it's just dedicated to drinking, that told you everything in, like, 10 seconds.
For sure. And you pointed out a specific scene here, the big one, which is, telling the whole backstory where the whole scene changes, which is so brilliantly done. Just with like one camera movement, we see everything go by there.
Alan Silvestri's score, which we can't use for copyright reasons, but that score he has, that very jazzy LA noir score, just sells that whole scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we compare that to, you mentioned this in the episode, the Back to the Future opening, the other Robert Zemeckis movie that you think is perfect.
We see two perfect films back to back. That's right. That's quite a trick.
It's pretty impressive. But in the beginning of Back to the Future, we see all those news articles and everything about who Doc is, and you kind of figure out a couple of details. You see on TV about the plutonium that is missing that comes up just a couple minutes after that. So he kind of uses that trick more than once, but it's effective. It's not like, oh, he did that again. I thought it was really well done.
It's really effective, and in my personal opinion, honestly I think it's done better in Roger Rabbit. It was a late edition, I think, in Back to the Future, where because Michael J. Fox took over the role, they realized, I think late into the game, that all of a sudden they're like, all right, well, we gotta catch people up on this plot quickly, and it works. It's fine, but it's essentially an opening credits scene that gives you a bunch of information quickly. It doesn't affect anything. What I like about Roger Rabbit is you have all these little clues about who Eddie is, but you've still got like a couple of big questions left. And then it answers those questions in the middle, and it just catapults you forward into the rest of the movie with giving him the empathy that he doesn't have. He has no empathy in the first act of that movie. Like it's just he's a total sleazebag. You really don't like him. Like watching it again, I hadn't seen it in a few years, and watching it again, I'm like, yeah, there's nothing likable about this guy. His one interaction with Betty Boop was it. Otherwise, I'm just like, oh, this guy's terrible. Like,
Yeah.
And that one scene switches everything 180 degrees.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of really solid performances in this. We talked about earlier with Christopher Lloyd and everything, and just how they're directed. You could tell that there's just an energy to it that really feels cartoony, and it feels like, I mean, you buy into it, no problem. I never had an issue with like, oh, that's a cartoon, and this is like one of the first times they really delved into the technology of that. As a kid, I mean, it blew our minds, obviously, but looking at it now, I mean, there are certain things that stick out a little bit, like Eddie's a little translucent a couple times. You could kind of see through him, but for the most part, the effects in this really hold up pretty well.
There's bizarre effects that you don't even notice unless you pause it. The Benny the cab scene. There's a scene where there's a few scenes where Eddie and Roger in the cab go spinning round and round, and the whole thing is animated. There's no Eddie Valiant in there. There was no way to do that. So they had an animator do it, and the frames are cut so quickly you can't tell. And if you pause it, you'll see this very animated version of Eddie with this long cartoon face as they're bouncing backwards down a back alley there, running away from the weasels. Yeah, it's like little things like that, but it's without the brilliant script and the direction and everything, it would be pointless. Like it's as George Lucas used to say, you know, special effects are just a tool. You know, now George is the tool, but I
didn't say
no. there would be it would be nothing without that. It would just be one of those things where like, well, that showed off some special effects nice, but you know, the story sucked.
Right.
It's the way everything came together in that perfect storm. And there's still little things that I notice, like watching it this time. I forgot to mention it. I wish I did, but one thing I forgot to mention is at the very end, somebody pointed this out in the comments. I'm like, why didn't I mention that? But at the very end of that scene, the mise en scène, it shows them as in the circus. You know, it's the two brothers and, you know, with their dad clowning around, Ringling Brothers. And that sets up the whole finale. Because otherwise, why would Eddie know how to juggle?
Right, and he's doing all the plates. Yeah.
This doughy guy knows how to do backflips and juggle. And the thing is, that little bit right there actually gave you everything. More so, like I sit in here in like movies like Rise of Skywalker or something where the exposition is terrible. Or things don't add up, you know, and here it is, and like that's such a throwaway thing that a number of people could have gotten through the movie and like maybe not even wondered like, well, why can he juggle? They just take it as cartoon logic, and this movie answered it right in the mise en scène. It's just right there. Mm-hmm. So it's just brilliant. It's one of those like movies that to do a blockbuster with good character exposition, it should be taught in film classes.
Right. I mean, they always tell you that film is a visual medium. You should show things happening visually instead of just blurting out exposition and everything like that. So,
and it doesn't happen enough. Like,
right.
They say that, and then it's so rare. Like there's almost this instinctual. Like I've seen some complaints from some film critics or analysts that's like, well, then when you do that, like when you do exposition like that, it's just like watching a home movie, and it's not so great when you do it like that either. And I'm like, as opposed to what? Like, you know, you're supposed to see things visually in a film. It's a technique that, yeah, it can be abused. Mm-hmm. Like I've seen it where it's just like, okay, it's a little much or it's too obvious, but I wish it would get used a little more, because it's a great way to impart information, I think, really quickly, without having to just rely always on dialogue. But the dialogue in Roger Rabbit, that's the funny thing, is there's never an exposition dump until near the end when it's all earned. Mm-hmm. I mean, both those scenes where you get an exposition dump, There's like 2 or 3 of them really. Like in a mystery, that's the point. So you've earned it by that point. But I think if you had all of that in the beginning, like front loading the film like that, it would have been a mess. I think you would have had your audience, half your audience is children. Anyway, they would have been bored. And I think people just would have been like, this movie's so slow, this doesn't have the energy I wanted. But by parsing it out in those little dialogue bits, I think it moves so much smoother.
Yeah, the visual bits, I mean, it's all in the execution. You don't want to overuse it, like you said. It's all in just how you're using it and when it comes up in the story and how long things are and how that works within the realms of the movie that you're making. So this, like you said, did great. And I haven't seen Roger Rabbit in years before rewatching it before editing. So it definitely gets better over time, and you could see. Yeah, I have more respect for it now than I did, when I was a kid, because when I was a kid, it was just like, hey, Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse are in the same movie. And now it's like, oh, this is really actually impressively done.
Well,
So,
the attention to detail, like there was one thing I didn't notice that I noticed this time, and a good movies like that. Ghostbusters is a very similar movie where you notice these little things happening in the background when you watch it as an adult. This one, when they start the mise en scène, you see a Betty Boop doll in the corner there. I never noticed that. The first time I noticed that was this time watching it. I knew instinctually that there must be some past with Betty because of the dialogue, but seeing that doll there for the first time, watching it on my, big screen TV, and like I could like squint, I'm like, oh my God, like never picked up on that. And that's something that I've been watching this movie for, like 30 years now. And it's a new detail you find. And like a really good film should do that. You notice a little something different every time.
absolutely. That's a good point. Some of the cartoon characters in this, I mean, obviously, like I said, we have the Warner Brothers characters and the Disney characters. We have Woody Woodpecker in there and Betty Boop and everyone. But they did create a new character for the movie. I mean, I know this is based on a book, so it was more created in the book, but Roger Rabbit himself is very over the top on purpose. Obviously, he's a cartoon character, but he's very in your face about everything. For me, on this last rewatch, it was a little obnoxious, like how hard they pushed. Like, hey, Eddie, just always in your face about things.
I'm not gonna
What do
lie.
you think
Of
about
all
him
the
now?
things in the movie that ages the least, or that ages the most, where I'm just like, yeah, this is not holding up. It is Roger.
Right.
I'm like
Yeah.
watching it again. I'm like, yeah, no, I get why some people would find this character really insufferable. It it works for me, I think, because he's paired with Eddie, and that you feel that angst between the two of them, particularly early on, where it's just like, oh my God, I hate this guy.
Yeah.
You don't want to be saddled with him. There's moments though. I actually find it strangely effective when Roger's like all upset over Jessica and crying in the back alley behind Acme, and I'm like, yeah, like this. I'm like, this somehow kind of works. Where I'm like, I feel sorry for the character, as
I agree.
obnoxious as he is.
Yeah, it's not in those moments where he's obnoxious. It's just everything else where he's just like they're trying to be quiet or something like that and sneak around. And he just doesn't care and is just in the camera's face like the entire
Yeah.
time. I mean, of course, that was a story bit when they were behind the wall, and I thought that was really well done with the shave and a haircut and him knocking on the wall, Judge
Shave
Doom.
and a haircut.
Yeah, and he just couldn't help himself and burst out of the way. I thought that was really well done, but there is parts where he's just like very in your face. And I think it's just a little bit too much for me. Do you think it would have worked if they had just another well-known character as the center character? If it was Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse or Woody Woodpecker or any other like well-known character at the center instead of Roger Rabbit?
No, because who's Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse gonna be dating that cheats on them? Like, like is Donald gonna,
Daffy, I could see maybe.
Daisy Duck? Like maybe Daffy. Daffy might be the only one I think you might be able to work with. I think you've got the problem too of like, there's no way a studio would let you. To take a character like that and give them kind of a different backstory than what they're used to. I think doing it with Roger was the right move. I can't see another way to do it really.
Hmm. I mean, they would have had to change the book basically, because I mean that's where they came from in the first place.
Well, they changed everything from the book already. So.
Right, but I mean the main character, Roger Rabbit.
The book is under. I love the people. There's always a handful of contrarians like, if you read the book, like, oh my god, but this movie did, and I'm like, the book is unfilmable.
The book is much darker, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no way like that you would have been able to do that. You might be able to do it now if you did the book. The only way you could do it is if it would be a Batchkey film. And I don't see, and the funding he would need probably to do it, like that's how you end up with Cool World, which he himself hated. So like that wasn't going to happen.
Right. Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff in here besides just the main character. I mean, we could talk about Jessica Rabbit, which is kind of introduced like a whole new character that people still cosplay as and everything now.
She's married to Roger Rabbit. Yeah, what a lucky girl.
Yeah, right. Like Roger's like the big catch in that situation. It's pretty funny.
He makes me laugh.
But,
Great voice work by I think it was Kathleen Turner.
Sure.
Yeah, very around in the 80s. Like,
right.
I haven't seen her in a long time.
Yeah, they created that sort of almost a parody on the femme fatale with her.
Yeah.
And that was like, she's not one of those things that aged the movie, I don't think. It's very, I mean, it's dated, but dated on purpose, like that 1940s kind of noirish, type of character. Did she change at all for you now? Is that character viewed any differently by you at this point?
Not really. Like, it was always a spoof of that kind of like pin up those the pre-code. They had a code basically that tried to make Hollywood all moralistic all of a sudden, but it was, to me, it reminds me more of the pre-1934 code, where you would have these buxom babes, and you had the wolf howling, and it doesn't bother me any because the movie knows exactly what it's doing. And she puts it best. She's like, I'm not bad, Mr. Valiant. I'm just drawn that way. God, it's dabbling in watercolors, Eddie.
Right.
I like that she legitimately loves her husband for whatever goddamn reason. Like, he makes me laugh. Yeah, she's not an awful character. Like, that's the weird thing about both Roger and Jessica is, as obnoxious as Roger can be, and as femme fatale as she is, they're decent people.
Yeah. No, there's nothing about them.
I actually think they're decent characters. I think they like each other. So.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's nothing like that. Oh, like Jessica's cheating on. I mean, like, they played it up like she was, but she was playing patty cake. Was that like?
That was the best joke in the movie. They set it up like patty cake, and then you see them looking at the pictures, and then they're like really playing patty cake, and it's beautiful too, because when you watch the movie a second time, like a good movie, you should watch it a second time and pick up on jokes you missed. You watch it the first time and you hear this, all these lines. It's like, not tonight, I have a headache. Okay, take off the hand buzzer. And they start going, and she's like, oh, patty cake. Oh, and then it cuts to Eddie, and he's just like, you gotta be kidding me. And like, when you're watching it, you're just thinking it's just like, oh, they're getting it on. Like, maybe he's watching tuna. And then the payoff for that scene was when he's going through the pictures and they're really just playing patty cake, and you watch it a second time, and now you know why he's saying, like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this was it? Like, it's such a brilliant joke, and a way to make a sex joke without the kids picking up on it.
I get that, but they play it up like he is. Maybe that was changed later or something. I don't know, because it does make sense that it's like this big joke, but they playing up like, I just took some dirty pictures. What's wrong? Like he actually filmed them having an affair or something, but I never
entirely got what they were going for with it. I just kind of assumed maybe it was like a tune logic kind of thing that's
maybe,
like for tunes.
Like, they're not supposed to play patty cake. Like, they only play patty cake with their spouses or whatever. Well, for the most part, like those little like adult bits and things I noticed obviously way more now. I think the last time I saw this was I want to say like maybe early high school or late grade school. So, like I said, it had been a really long time, and I still wasn't picking up on a lot of those jokes. But it seems like way more of an adult movie than a kid movie to me. I mean, it's way more. It feels like geared towards adults than kids. I mean, kids are
Well,
gonna
keep
watch
in
it because
mind, this was
but
before the '90s when all of a sudden we had to worry about children's fragile little minds. There was a whole lot of bleed over. I mean, you had movies like Terminator and RoboCop being marketed to kids with the toy lines. RoboCop. I mean, like we laugh now, but it's like think about that movie and then think of the fact that there was RoboCop action figures, and you're just like, whoa. The '80s were just like that, and you had a lot of crossover films that were just bizarrely not meant for kids. I mean, that's the thing about Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters we consider kind of a kids movie now. It was not back then.
Right.
It's not.
I don't consider the first Ghostbusters movie a kids movie myself, but I could see. I
Well, the
mean, it
rest
did
of
get
Hollywood
popular.
does now because
I
whenever
know.
they decide to make a new one, it becomes a kids' property.
Right. That's what it
Um,
became later. But obviously, as you talked about in your episode about
but
Ghostbusters
kids.
2.
But here's the thing: kids responded to it.
Right.
That
Yeah.
was the secret. A lot of these films had bleed over where they were. It wasn't that it was necessarily made for kids 100%, but that there was kind of a more of a the idea of a general audience was wider back then. So that you would have something like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is only PG, and that is comical nowadays because that is a PG-13 movie at least, if ever there was one. But they were meant more for kind of like general audiences, where if you wanted to drag your kid to it, all right. Like I saw a whole bunch of stuff when I was a kid that, in retrospect, compared to nowadays, it would just be like there's no way. But we got to see it, and Roger Rabbit I think was one of them. But I think in Roger Rabbit's case, it may have been kind of intentional because they knew that they were going to have these cartoon characters, and this might be the brilliance of Roger. Well, even though we're complaining about it as adults that he's obnoxious and in your face, Roger, when I was a kid, was who I like identified with. I identified with Eddie as well. I was actually, even as a kid, really kind of liked Eddie by the end of it. But Roger was that was your ticket in, your foot in the door, your gateway drug. Like that's what got you kind of into the movie if you were under the age of 12.
Right.
And yeah, I think Roger Rabbit kind of speaks to all ages because of that, even though it wasn't aimed solely at kids. I think they definitely knew they're just like, kids are going to see this, so let's toe a line if we can.
Right. One more thing before we move on that I wanted to or one of the notes I wanted to bring up. The tunnel that leads to Toontown.
Yeah.
That's the same tunnel from Back to the Future, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Okay. I was about to say. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's the same.
LA somewhere.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was like, I'm 99% sure that's the same tunnel, and that's awesome that he keeps using that same place. Also, I wanted to ask you, there have been rumors for years and years about trying to make a sequel to Roger Rabbit. I don't think that these studios can play nice at this point to come out with a movie that's going to have all these same characters in it. Do you see maybe Disney, just the Disney characters, having a sequel? I mean, there's been talks about it even as soon as a few years ago. Do you think they're ever going to make a sequel to this movie?
I hope not. I don't know. I don't think so. One, I can't for the life of me see Zemeckis doing it. Two, Bob Hoskins is dead.
Yes.
Three, like Charles Fleischer is still around, but I mean, like, they're all getting older. Like, who knows, how many in the coming years, or as people naturally age, are not going to be with us anymore. Like, you're fastly running out of time to get, a lot of that original cast back there. I don't see the point. There was, because I remember reading it when I was a kid, a sequel comic. And it wasn't really very good. It was trying to delve, I think, into Doom's backstory a little. And Eddie, I remember Eddie Valiant had given up drinking and now was addicted to jelly beans, which it was one of those things where even as a kid, I'm like, it's kind of lame. Like, I just didn't know what the hell to make of that. Like, I don't know where you would go with the story. it would be more if we were going to do this, I would want to see. The only way it would work is do a mini series or like a Netflix series. Come up with a different character and work it like they did with the Fargo TV series, where it's like, okay, we're gonna different characters, and then do it a Toon Detective, various mysteries, and go from there. But divorce yourself from Eddie Valiant, and all of that. One way to do it would be maybe Eddie retired and we move it a decade ahead. Maybe it's the 50s now. Maybe it's the 60s. Maybe we may involve the Flintstones and the Jetsons and get Hanna-Barbera more in there.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
That's about it though. But a movie sequel, I'm like, there's no point. Roger Rabbit, I think, is like Ghostbusters and a lot of those classic movies where it's like lightning strikes once. You're never gonna recapture that magic. Don't bother. Just let it be. I love the fact that, I think I said in the video, if they were doing this movie nowadays, it would be setting up 8 franchises.
Right.
I love the fact that you had all this setup and this world building and character development. It's just the one movie. Like, that's it. So it's what makes it special.
So that's our thoughts on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I thought that Rob did a really good job at highlighting the character exposition in that, and specifically that one scene, I think, really holds that whole argument together and how really good it is.
And my French was impeccable.
Oh, yes. The mise en scene.
I don't
It's okay.
French.
Only reason I knew is because in film class, my professor was like, it's mise en scène. Mise en, like, okay, I get it.
It was spelled scene. Yes. I pronounced it Americano.
Americano.
I pronounced it like Brad Pitt would in Inglourious Basterds.
Yes, perfect analogy. Yes.
Scene. Now I have taken Spanish, German, and Japanese. So
no French.
Those, if I mess up, I'm really disappointed in myself. French I have never taken. So
right. I mean, this is the second French mistake, I think, isn't it? Because the first, the Indiana Jones thing.
Yeah, there was
the Vichy France thing.
That was a mistake. That was a mistake in dates. They both involved France. That's a very unfortunate coincidence. But
that's your weak spot, France.
Nothing against the French. Like, they're great filmmakers.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Anyway, so this was on Disney Plus, so it's still a Disney movie. I think it was under Buena Vista Entertainment, I think, released under that. So moving on from that to another Disney property, Aladdin, one of their biggest animated epics, I think, that have come out.
Was that a thing that happened?
Golden Age. Yeah, it was a thing for a little while. Now, this came out in 92, I believe, was the first Aladdin movie. Yep. So I was 3 or 4 years old, so I could see this in theaters at that point. I discovered it later on.
I feel so old.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right, Rob. We're all getting old. I'm over 30 now. It's fine. So
no, you're done for.
Yes, it's over now.
Enjoy this slide, my friend. I'm 10 years ahead of you.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, yeah, Aladdin was one of my favorites growing up. It was that and Peter Pan were like jockeying for position as number one, and then later,
weird combo.
Yeah, Peter Pan and Aladdin. Yeah,
I've never heard that combo. My 2 favorite Disney films: Peter Pan and Aladdin.
Growing up. But then
There's
now,
nothing wrong with that. That's a specific combination I've never heard.
Right. I think Hook 2, gave me a little bit more of a different perspective on Peter Pan, and I just kind of got sucked up in that world and everything. But yeah, Aladdin. Now I look back at that's my favorite one. I like it better than Lion King. I like it better than a lot of the other classic Disney films. So I had an idea for a long time to make this a FanScription episode, but I kind of held back because I didn't want to do another one right away after the Lion King one, which is our most successful episode. I was like, okay, that's great that people like that one. I don't want to just do the Disney ones. Right after the other, even though I've done Disney ones, back-to-back months now because we're doing 2 a month. So we need to fill up these episodes with some kind of content. So I want to talk to you first because you were more online than I was when this came out. Online as in
I was going to say the internet,
not the internet, but you know what I mean. Your brain was.
But I was not online that way.
Right. Yes, you were able to interpret things more than I was as a young baby at that point. So what was it like seeing Aladdin for the first time in theaters? Seeing Robin Williams connected, and he might also be the through line between this and Peter Pan with Hook and everything. Maybe that's why I like both these movies so much. Even though he's not in the Disney Peter Pan, but still there's that connection with Hook. He was kind of the first big celebrity that lent his voice to a Disney property to play the genie and everything. Was that the selling point for you as a kid to go see it? What was your draw into this, and what were your memories of it?
We just saw it because it was a Disney movie. Right. Honestly, the trailer, when I saw it, the trailer came attached with, is it Beauty and the Beast? Trailer didn't do much for me. I honestly thought it was like it looked kind of lame. I mean, keep in mind, at this point, 1992, I'm 13. So I'm getting to that point where I'm like, Disney's kind of like, so I was like all cynical, and I'm like, this looks lame. And like, all the clips that I remember they showed in the trailer were not the best clips. Like, it was a lot of like Rob Williams like, I'm in the mood to help you, dude. And like, it was just like, so I really wasn't, I mean, I went to see it because it was a Disney movie. I wasn't super excited, and I never laughed harder. It's certainly to this day the funniest Disney movie they've ever made. Whether it's the best, I mean, it's not my favorite if I'm going to say what the best is, but it's the funniest, like hands down. I still I threw that movie on a couple years ago, and I'm like, no, this is still really funny. And I mean, it's all Robin Williams. You can't. There's nothing really interesting at all about Aladdin himself. He's not funny. The monkey's not funny. Like, it's all the genie.
The little kids, I think Abu is pretty funny, but yeah.
No, the monkey's not funny.
To an adults, yes, of course he's not funny. He just talks like Donald Duck kind of, and that's about
it. Iago was funny.
Yeah, of course. Never Godfrey.
Iago and Jafar's relationship, and I thought the Sultan was very funny when paired with Iago and like they made a perfect trio of just all annoying each other. But generally speaking, when it came to the leads, like, I liked Jasmine just fine. She was inoffensive, but it was all Robin Williams, and like, I just remember just laughing so hard at that movie. We bought the soundtrack because I thought the score was great and the lyrics were hilarious. But yeah, Robin Williams made that movie, and I remember generally, like, even people my age were all just like, yeah, that was pretty fucking funny. Like, apart from that, like, I don't know, you'd have to talk to other people, but I don't remember. I don't know if it was received quite as well as Beauty and the Beast, because like that got an Academy Award, but certainly everybody like at that time just thought it was a really, really funny movie. And like, you could tell that with Jasmine and Aladdin in particular, they were trying to tap into like kind of a Gen X vibe at the time. They were trying to tap into like our generation, like, it's like, these like teenagers, and like, it's all good. And, like, we were the kind of slacker generation. He's just this street rat who's like practically roller skating down the I think they tried hard to appeal to us, and I think overall it worked, but not for the reasons nobody sits here and goes like, oh, Aladdin, like, that's an amazing character. Everybody's like, no, it's the genie.
Well, he's the most memorable thing about it, for sure. I think Aladdin's a great straight man. I mean, he's likable enough where you're rooting for him. So that's all he really needs to do, because everything else that's interesting is happening around him.
The effects were impressive too. I remember being blown away that first time that Cave of Wonders pops up and starts talking with the CGI. Particularly the bass. We had a new theater near us. We were living in Seattle at the time, and it had just opened. It was one of the first new ones that had like the 7 screens or whatever. And when that bass rumbled, when that thing talked, the diamond in the rough, the whole theater was just like, I remember Doug and I, we were just like, because it was the first stadium seating that we remember too. We were just like, whoa. That and then the flying carpet stuff. So really impressive effects. I remember being blown away by that.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely things that are in this that visually are kind of beyond compare. for that time period. And this, I think, was the biggest hit Disney had in terms of financially until Lion King came out a few years later. So this was kind of the precursor to their apex in that golden era.
We saw it, like, I think we saw it twice. Like, I definitely saw it more than once. So
Yeah.
that it came back. I was 13 years old and like, Disney's for kids, and I came back. So
there's a lot of appeal for teenagers and older. I mean, there's for boomers. I mean, there's a ton of appeal with all the references that the genie was making throughout the entire movie. So there's jokes that they would laugh at, my parents would laugh at, that I would like. I don't know why that's funny, but it looks funny because he changed into a different character.
Here's the secret: Animaniacs figured this out. The writing team behind Animaniacs is that you can make what now we would call boomer jokes that would go completely over our heads as, 10-year-olds watching this movie. And if you make it zany and madcap enough and silly enough, doesn't matter that we don't get the reference. We were laughing anyway, just because it was silly.
It looks funny.
It's brilliant. And then all the adults, meanwhile, are howling. And I do remember that. I do remember my second time we went, my parents came with, and they were laughing hardcore at the movie. And there is something like, it brings a family together when you have that. Like, it's just like the adults can laugh at the jokes and the kids are laughing at the jokes. So, like, that was something I thought was really cool about the movie. It was not just meant for little kids. Like, the adults got a laugh out of it too.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of a Disney signature at that point too, that they could slip in those little references that weren't controversial, but I mean that the whole family could really attach to at some point.
Who the hell knows who Ed Sullivan is? If you like, I had no idea. Right? At 13, I had no clue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just Robin Williams' energy about everything just comes right through his voice. I mean, you don't even need to see him. They made Genie look like him a little bit, though. I mean, like, so his presence was kind of felt visually, like his nose and everything kind of looked like
mouth. Him. There's something about the smile and the nose, and like you can see how they did a kind of a light caricature.
Yeah,
it was pretty brilliant.
For sure. And that, I think, helped with, matching his voice and having us attached to the character. I think it helped a little bit there. And this was prime Robin Williams time. I think this is right before, I mean, he really was starting to take off with families and everything. This did a lot for his career, to endear himself to people my age, and even, throughout the years younger than me who discovered Aladdin and all that. So
some of us watched Mork and Mindy.
Yes, I watched Mork and Mindy on Nick at Night, Rob. So yes, I know about Mork and Mindy.
I'm just giving you shit.
I know. No, I got it.
No, you're absolutely right though. Like I knew who Robin Williams was because of Mork and Mindy and Nick at Night, but like that really cemented him again. And I knew who he was because of Hook. So between those two films, he was somebody I was very aware of, but like that really just put him in the spotlight for a whole new generation.
Absolutely. That and Hook and Mrs. Doubtfire and that string of films, Jumanji, like all those movies he had in the 90s that were geared towards kids. Jumanji, yeah. And that, were successful. He was a big box office draw. It was like him and Jim Carrey kind of coming up at that same time, who had, I think Robin had more the emotional center that people could connect to besides all the funny stuff, where we didn't see the stuff with Jim Carrey until later, his more dramatic roles. He was just the crazy guy.
Robin Williams loved schmaltz.
Sure,
which is
and
not
I love schmaltz too, Rob.
Yeah, which is not something Jim Carrey was about. Jim Carrey was just straight up like pratfall kind of comedy and very physical comedy. And Robin Williams can be too, but Robin Williams was very into like, if he chose a movie, like, and some of them are better and some of them are not, but if he chose them, there was some schmaltzy component to it. Like, it's supposed to make you feel good. Like, heartwarming, I think is the word you might be looking for.
Yeah. And I think because we have that heart associated with his funny side, I mean, he can make you laugh and cry from minute to minute. That just, I loved Robin Williams at that point. So, and I still did. I mean, as I got older, I discovered movies like 1 Hour Photo, which is his best performance and terrifying. And
I love 1 Hour Photo.
What a great movie. It's his best performance. I absolutely love it. And he
kept because he reinvented himself with that, and he reinvented himself with Good Will Hunting. I remember when that came out, I was, what was I, 17, 18, and I was like blown away. I'm like, oh, that's right. He can like act like without just doing silly voices. Like, we kind of forgot for a little while, and it's like, oh my God, he's amazing. Like, you forget because he got so wrapped up in that. So he was always reinventing himself, which I thought was super cool.
Right, and we could point to other people really loved Dead Poet Society too, was coming out around that time. It was just it was him that we were attracted to. It was just his personality, just it shined through every one of his performances. There was just that bit of himself that we could all attach to, and for me, I mean, it was just a big probably my first favorite actor was Robin Williams. You know, just like attaching myself to all these different films and performances that he did that were so huge and big and larger than life, but also had the small moments that you could really look at and feel real. You know, that
movies of his I hate, and I mean absolutely loathe.
Patch Adams.
Still, Patch Adams, Bicentennial Man, like
Bicentennial Man. I saw it at a hotel.
There's a ton. There's a ton of movies he's been in that I'm like, this is garbage, but I love him.
Yes.
Like, and you can't say that about a lot of actors where it's just like, God, I can't stand sitting through this movie. There's a handful. I mean, but it's not just I like him like Christopher Walken. I like watching him because he's, you know, so weird, and Christopher Walken. It's like there's something about Robin Williams where he's like hypnotizing, where it's just like you just feel good watching him, even if the movie's awful.
Right. You want to be his friend. You want to be his friend. You want to talk to him. Yeah. It's like someone that you could actually approach. And I think that weighed heavy on him too, because he was kind of this crude comedian in his stand-up and stuff. So when he got kind of saddled with the heartwarming, funny, but kid funny guy, I think that kind of changed his outlook on things a little bit, and realized that he was kind of becoming a role model, which is weird for a comedian, but I think he kind of became that throughout his films.
Yeah, I don't know what drove him down that path, but I mean, clearly the films he chose, it seems to me like he wanted to go down that path. So like there was a very schmaltzy side to Robin Williams that I think he tapped into and then leaned hard into it. Like even his early comedy is as crude as it can get. Like he'll have some really touching moments in it. So it's there from the beginning.
Absolutely. The heart of that guy, I haven't seen that kind of effective sentimentality in any actor.
That's the word I'm looking for. Sentimentality.
Yeah. Schmaltzy. Yeah, it's about the same thing, but yeah. But I haven't seen any actor since then genuinely exude that. Maybe Tom Hanks sometimes, but Robin Williams was one of a kind. And his performance in Aladdin, I think, opened up to a new.
I actually like Robin Williams better than Tom Hanks.
Sure, I mean, I love Tom Hanks too. I mean, I absolutely do. But I mean, in terms of really sincere sentimentality and someone that you really feel like through their roles, he's the only one that kind of compares. But Robin Williams, I think, is untouchable in that regard. So he
wears his roles on his sleeve.
Absolutely, 100%. Getting into my changes here. So this is, like I said, was an idea that I had right after the Lion King episode came out. Some people pointed me to, in the comments, to this book series that Disney does called Twisted Tales. And they did a whole bunch of what ifs. And since they saw the Lion King one, they thought, oh, this is kind of like that. So I remember looking at all, just skimming through some of the ideas in there. And one of them was for Aladdin. So I was like, oh, that's cool that it was what if Aladdin never had the lamp or something like that. I was like, yeah, that's the kind of a cool idea. I would love to read those at some point if I ever have the time to go through a bunch of those things. But I want to be clear. I didn't draw the idea from that, but it was definitely kind of already in my head, something I wanted to do. I know. So people have pointed out that I kind of ripped it off, but it wasn't in my head when I was writing or making it.
Don't you get that everything that's ever been done has been done? Don't try anything. Because Simpsons did it.
Silly me. But yeah, this was, when those ideas were rolling around in my head and I saw that synopsis of the thing, I was like, oh, that's cool that it's kind of already out there, that kind of similar idea of the what if that I was thinking of. But I wanted to take it in a more twisted, no pun intended, direction. So what I did was definitely elongate the part of the movie where Aladdin is banished to I guess it's the North Pole or whatever in the movie. I just said it was super East Russia in my version.
All I remember from the movie is that his assets were frozen.
Yes, assets were frozen.
Venue was chosen. It's the ends of the earth. Whoopee.
Yes. What did he say? Whoopee or for free? I couldn't tell.
Maybe it's a Mandela effect, but I remember it's whoopee.
I thought he was like, for free.
That sounds way funnier. I'm just gonna keep it that way.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But anyway, I changed it to where the first movie kind of ends there. So it's like this cliffhanger ending where, and at that point, it was still like an hour, 10 minutes in the movie. So animated length, you could still conceivably say if they were going to do a two-parter, they could end it there and still be a full-length movie. Where it's a cliffhanger where Jafar is taking over Agrabah and everything. So the second movie is about Aladdin's journey kind of coming back, but we run into his dad from the third film. Now, Rob, you haven't seen the Aladdin sequels, have you?
No.
Okay, so
you
you
just
haven't
told
seen
me to do John Rhys Davies.
Right.
No, okay, wait. Okay, no, I did see The Return of Jafar.
Okay, so
I saw that when it first came out, and I was like, who's this guy that's not Robin Williams' movie?
Yeah.
I know it's Dan Casaneta, but I'm like not getting over it.
What are you going to do at that point?
Need
they
Robin
had problems. Yeah, no one's going to, like we said, no one can equal that kind of
Why does
energy.
the genie sound like Homer Simpson? I'm out!
So I mean that was the part of the series too that launched the TV series that he was also voicing the genie for, so it matched up in that regard. But they did bring Robin Williams back. They made some kind of deal because he did have some kind of feud with Disney to do the voice for the genie in the King of Thieves movie, which came out in '96, I think I want to say. So that was a way more interesting premise because they introduced his father as the leader of the 40 Thieves, and that was John Rhys Davies and everything. So that had a much more interesting hook for me. I like watching them back to back now. I think Return to Jafar might be a little bit better quality wise, but in terms of the ideas introduced and the Hand of Midas and all that stuff, it felt much more like an Indiana Jones movie. I think that King of Thieves was kind of the apex of what they could have done with a sequel to an Aladdin film. So him running into the 40 Thieves outside of Agrabah and like sort of looking for the Hand of Midas and like that big gap, that big time gap that we have. And the big thing that everybody loves is the Aladdin with the beard, which a lot of people are like, hey. Like, well, wait.
Finally, my fan fiction realized. To DeviantArt, I need more.
Yeah, look, got a lot of comments about. I think one of them was like, no one wants to talk about how daddy Aladdin is with the beard. So I thought that was very amusing.
We knew this was going to happen when we started this show. It was our cross to bear, Walter.
Yes, absolutely. But people people connected in many different ways to this FanScription episode, it seemed. Besides the comparisons to the Twisted Tales book, it seemed like people mostly enjoyed this one. A lot of the voices that we did, like you were great as Kasim. I think you do a great John Rhys Davies. I think Jafar as Doug doing Jafar was great. Even
Doug's Jafar is a Doug. The one thing about doing this show is it surprises me the things we can and can't do. Mm-hmm. I honestly did not think that Doug would be great as Liam Neeson, and I'm like, holy shit, his Liam Neeson's way better than mine. Like, who knew? I was like, I had no clue. I'm like, you know, and there's other things where like it's like, can you do this? And I'm like, I thought I could, I can't. So.
Yeah, we always surprised about what we can actually pull off. We had Malcolm voice Razul for a couple lines, and he was like a little apprehensive about that because it's Jim Cummings, and he was like, he's kind of tough. But I think he pulled them off really well in those couple lines that he did.
Malcolm does the most pitch perfect Winnie the Pooh I've ever heard, and that's Jim Cummings.
There you go. I mean, it's not that difficult because, I mean, he's a professional voiceover artist. I mean, Malcolm could pull off a lot of different things.
Suck it up.
Right. He did a great job. Tamara as the new character, which I introduced. So this is the twist that I put on it. Was besides Aladdin taking a long time to come back, was that Jafar kind of realizes he's the most powerful man on earth with all the sorcerer powers he was given by the genie. And since the genie can't do these things, he has these rules. Jafar doesn't have those rules, so he brings back the queen, who I named Aida, which she doesn't have an official name, so I like what Aida means is like the returned, things like that. So I kind of tied into the meaning of the name. So her coming back, I thought was really cool to just interject that character who I could put my own spin on because she wasn't talked about at all in any of the movies. Like she's mentioned in the TV series a little bit, but I really had an open playing field to do whatever I wanted with that. And what I really, kind of twisted the knife in there was that he brings her back, but she turns into this rotted version of herself physically that the genie almost showed off, when he was explaining to Aladdin that he can't bring back the dead. Green and white.
Family picture.
Yes, a family picture. This is dark Disney, Rob. People love it. So So her still keeping her mental capacities and everything, but her physical self was just like depleted and malformed. And Jafar's disgusted by this, so he sends her out, and she kind of leads this resistance. And once Aladdin finally comes back, they team up to take back the kingdom and everything. So that was a unique take that I had never seen before. So I mean, that at least that was one unique thing I had in this episode that nobody compared to something else. But at the same time, having Tamara bringing in Tamara to voice Queen Aida, that was really fun working with her on this one. She really, I mean, Tamara has a very unique voice. It's very like
Very Tamara.
Yeah, it cuts through like the air. Like Tamara has that kind of powerful presence when she really wants to talk, like and say a powerful line, like a knife just cutting right through the air. So I thought she did really well as that character, and she got to put her own spin on it too. So we had fun kind of imagining how she would say these lines and stuff. Heather, who's great in pretty much whatever we ask her to do, voice Jasmine, and she did a pretty good job.
Always give her these really difficult ones.
She did great as
because we're assholes.
Well, because we know she could handle it, Rob. This is we have the.
It's not that I like torturing Heather.
Right, we have the confidence in her that we know she could pull it off. So she did great.
We'll go with that.
Yes, that's what we'll go with. She did great as Jasmine. So I was kind of left to do Aladdin. I wasn't great as Aladdin. If I were to make a change on this one, I probably would have just had Malcolm voice Aladdin because he could kind of do that deeper, squeaky thing that Steve from Full House, who voiced Aladdin, pulled off really well. So if I were to redo it, I would have just had Malcolm do it. So that and the Genie line, I specifically didn't want to use Genie in any of the dialogue because no one can do a good Robin Williams. Like, it's very difficult. The only guy who I've seen...
and I were agonizing as you were trying to, like...
We were trying to direct. So, the only person who I've seen do a good Robin Williams is that guy who kind of looks like him, who was, like, famous on Facebook a few years ago and can do really good impressions, and that was one of them. He was the only person who I've ever seen who could do a really good Robin Williams. So, I mean... Like, I tried to get both you and, like you said, you and Doug to do one, and it's like...
Wasn't happening.
It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad.
You asked we were... at least mine, and Doug's maybe a little better, but at least mine, I'm like, this is awful. This is just trash.
But, I mean, at this point, it was just trying to match, like, an impression of him, so we could kind of... People can get that it was him, because we're not going to be able to match the voice. It's just like, oh, I get it. This is supposed to be Robin Williams. Do the stereotypical kind of thing. Doug did Doug did try a take trying to do it like one of Robin Williams' voices, that kind of girly voices that he was sort of writing the letter, "Dear Jafar," and started talking like that.
Which I almost buried it in the same pit where all the lost copies of E.T. are.
Right. So, yeah, we did try some different takes on it, and I had already recorded before that, and it was like, we all sound the same. Like, no one's going to sound like Robin Williams. I was like, I'll just use mine, whatever. So it either or, me or Rob or Doug would have sounded the same trying to imitate him. So I haven't seen too many comments about, like, they're disgusted by our version of Robin Williams, but I mean, I think...
How dare you!
I know. I think everybody understands that you just can't match what he did. So we did the best we could. And I think...
Unsubscribe!
Right. How dare you try to do something like that? But I think doing the Dear John letter, which I took the direct lines from the movie, as sort of a Dear Jafar letter, kind of helped us out a little bit because it wasn't him talking full funny. It was like him pretending to be upset and crying through his words and stuff. So I thought that turned out as well as we could make it. So there's a little inside scoop and stuff I would have maybe changed about the episode. But I'm really proud of this one for the most part. I got to involve all the characters throughout the franchise that I really liked. I really love the Kasim character. Robbie, if you ever get a chance, if there's a rainy day outside after the quarantine is over and you want to watch an old Disney movie, the third Aladdin movie, there are some good ideas in there. You might like the Kasim character.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of Return of Jafar, so...
Yeah, and understandably so. The animation in that movie's all over the place. I mean, they had their budget cut probably in a third, so that's understandable. But
yeah, no, it was very paint by number for me. Pardon the pun, but
yeah,
right down to the story. I'm just like, eh.
Yeah, and Jafar's my favorite villain. I like him better than Scar. I like him better than, like, Maleficent. He's my number one bad guy. for Disney.
He's up there for me. He's probably my top 10 easily.
Yeah, he's just so delectably evil, and his chemistry with Iago helps out a lot too.
Well, they were all, I want to say, Jafar, Frollo, maybe Gaston.
Gaston was
a couple others. They were all animated by the same woman, who was some like 30-something-year-old soccer mom at the time, back in the 90s, and like she would tell people this, and they're like, "You came up with the designs for all these like villains," and she's just like, "Yep." So she was a huge talent. I don't know if she's still working with Disney or what happened, but yeah, I remember reading an article from way back in the day that all of these villains were done by like one woman, and I'm just like, that's kind of amazing. She's like, yeah, I just tap into my dark side, but there is something interesting about them where, at least from when I remember looking at them, they have, I don't know how to put it, a kind of feminine quality to them.
Oh yeah, Jafar, you could definitely see that.
Very interesting, like pursed lips, a way of moving that's very like graceful. Right. Frollo had it too, where I'm just like, yeah, it's interesting how that, like, I don't know if that was intentional on her part or if it like, or if it just seeped in, but there is kind of a feminine quality to those Disney villains at the time that's interesting. Like it makes it, there's something about it that it makes them feel a little more otherworldly, maybe compared to some of the other character designs. But
right. It's funny because did she make Ursula too? Was she a part of that?
She might have done this. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember. I literally read this article back in like 1999, maybe.
Okay, it was a long time ago.
It was so long ago. But I thought it was a cool article, and I never forgot it.
If she did make Ursula, then, because it's a female character, but a very masculine kind of character too. So like the kind of gender flopping within the character, if that's the same person who designed her, is pretty interesting too. But yeah, overall, Jafar is definitely my number one favorite Disney bad guy. Scar is probably number two, but I mean, I just can't get over how great like the chemistry was. You talked earlier about with Iago and Gilbert Gottfried and everything, and they're just perfect. They're back and forth. I love when they laugh, when they do the evil laugh, ha 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 ha, ha, and they just start laughing with each other. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole movie. So.
My favorite Iago moment. Oh God! When he's getting chased by that flying carpet in the first movie, I love that. And when he gets knocked out and just sees the flying carpet versions of the song going, but
yeah,
there's like one moment where Iago just goes, "Oh God, he's cracked! Jafar, hello!" Ding ding ding, knocks on his head, and Jafar at the same moment looks so crazed and out of his mind, like,
I know, he's got like rings around his eyes and stuff. They really made him look nuts. I love when they get sucked into the lamp at the end, and he's like, "Get your foot on my face!" And he goes, "Shut up, you moron!" Makes me laugh to this day.
I love Gilbert Gottfried as Iago. Like,
yeah, he's so
an underrated character because everyone goes, "Oh, the genie," but I'm like, no, Gilbert Gottfried made that tiny role into something great.
Absolutely, and they redeemed him in the second movie, which actually was really well done. I think that was the best part of the movie, was bringing Iago kind of onto the good guy side. And that was
didn't the cartoon show come out before that movie?
I thought that was like the launch of the cartoon show. Maybe I'm wrong.
I can't remember if that was the launch or if that got released later, because I felt like I had seen a couple episodes of the cartoon first somehow, and I thought that the movie was like, oh, this must be the bridge that explains why Iago is just working with them now.
Yeah, you might be right.
I remember when I saw like the cartoon, like I watched like an episode or two, it didn't do much. I remember thinking, I was like, why is Iago with them? I thought wasn't he the douchebag? Like,
yeah, they definitely brought him around, but I thought that was like that redemption arc was actually pretty well done for that direct-to-video movie. If I were to redo this again, like I might have had Iago turn on Jafar, maybe to be a part of that resistance, kind of as like everyone's against him, because I did like that turn for Iago. So maybe that's something I would change if I were to do it again, but. Them wandering the desert for the rest of their days instead of him turning into a genie, I think that is an appropriate ending for those characters as well. I think we're going to wrap it up there. We've been talking for over an hour, 2 episodes to cover. So if you guys have been watching or listening to this, make sure you subscribe to our iTunes feed or however you get podcasts on the audio. Also, make sure you stay tuned right here for 2 more FanScriptions coming up later this month. Originally, I wanted to have an episode or a podcast every week through May, but Batman happened, so I'm doing an episode per day this month, and I just don't have time to edit stuff that's coming
When
out.
are you? I'm
I know.
Batman.
Yes, Batman. I'm Batman. I like how Jim does it. He goes like, "I'm Batman," basically like Cartman.
I'm Batman Amidala.
So if you want to check those episodes out, those are coming out every single day this month. Is it a review of Batman, the animated series?
Sounds like an anime girl, like the anime version of Batgirl. Who are you? I'm Batman.
I'm Batman. And then you got to do the peace sign on the eye. So that's what I'm doing right now and trying to get ready for the 2 episodes that I'm going to edit at the end of the month. So Rob, you're going to do the next one. And then we're going to have Doug come out with one towards the end of the month, which is going to be a Space Jam episode that he's wanted to do for a long time, which I think we can all say is the spiritual successor to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Space Jam is going to be something that I think you guys are going to enjoy because his take on it is kind of about Lola, centering around the Lola character. So he has a lot of gripes with that character. So I think you'll enjoy that one for sure. And also the Looney Tunes cartoons episode that is coming out on HBO Max, a brand new cartoon show for the Looney Tunes, which it seems much more in line with the original sort of Bob Clampett era 40s style slapstick humor that the Looney Tunes were famous for is going to be the center of that show. So I'm actually really looking forward to that show. So we're going to release that episode in conjunction with the Looney Tunes cartoon. Rob, you got any ideas of what you're doing next?
Yeah, somebody asked me a very good question in one of the Twitch chats, and it was, are there any movies that are saved by the ending? And I'm like, yeah, I could think of a couple, so I might just do a brief with all the Batman stuff coming out. I want to take it easy on you. A brief thing on like a couple examples of that. I'm definitely Rogue One is one where I'm like, if you didn't have that ending, that movie, because the whole first half of that film, I was like, it's fine, but you know. And another huge one was Onward.
I like that whole movie though.
I really don't. Like, I'm
a
fan.
First
half at all, but that last part of it, like, to me, redeemed the whole first half to the point that I ended up recommending people see it, which is really impressive for an ending to do. I actually thought it was an amazing ending that took risks and didn't cop out at any point. And I'm like, yeah, that to me is an example. I'm like, it saved the whole movie for me. So
great. All right. Well, look forward to that. That's a good idea for an episode. And look forward to Doug's episode on Space Jam towards the end of the month. And then we'll be back to entertain you guys, hopefully, through this rough time that we're all going through. Hopefully, you guys are staying safe out there. And we'll be back to normal in sometime soon. I was going to say no time, but
by
it's not going to be
2026.
Yes, hopefully by 2026 we can all gather together and give praise to everyone around the world. All right. Yeah, everyone just gives praise to the open air. It's the church of the outside, Rob. I'll talk to you guys later. Make sure you guys check out the episodes, check out Batman, and stay tuned for more great FanScription content right here on Channel Awesome. We'll see you guys later.
Take care, guys.